Anthony Horowitz. I was born in Stanmore on April 5th, 1955.
Currently, I'm 58 years old, living happily with my wife, Jill Green, whom I married in Hong Kong, with two wonderful children, Nicholas and Casey and Horowitz. I was born into a quite wealthy Jewish family and was woken to the sound of a gong and fed by servants every morning. Honestly, it wasn't all that bad. The only real pain at home was my mean grandmother, who I despised, and despise to this day. Even though I live happily now, I can never look happily back into my childhood, as I was abused during my time in O'Reilly Farm School, a truly wretched place. The headmaster would beat me till I bled, leaving me with not only physical, but mental wounds as well. I would tell my friends stories about escape to cheer them and myself up. After I got out of that horrid school, I went to rugby school, where, thankfully, I wasn't beaten. I then moved on to the University of York, a very nice school, and I am proud I got in. I was able to pursue my career as a writer and wrote my first book at age 22, The Sinister Secret of Frederick K. Bauer. Sadly though, my father, Mark Horowitz, died shortly before the release, leaving all his wealth in a Swiss bank account, never to be found again. We went bankrupt shortly after. I can still remember the lifeless body that was once my father. Even though I didn't know as much as I wish I could have about him, like what he did for a job, I still miss him and love him to this day. My mother was never the same after that, sadly, and it became hard to talk to her. Since the release of my first book, I have published many other books and started many successful series. I also wrote a popular movie series known as Spoils War. In 2000, I released the first book in the Alex Rider series, Stormbreaker, which really boosted my career and made me the top author in the UK. I've also released other various books, such as the Power of Five series and my own horror book. I feel like being a writer was a great choice for me, and I hope to continue writing in the future.
Hello, my name is Lorne MOA. I was born in Belleville, Ontario, Canada on May 12, 1921. As a child, I was fascinated by animals and nature. At the height of the Great Depression, me and my family moved to Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan, and me and my dog Mutt loved to explore the Saskatchewan countryside. My pets at the time were a rattlesnake, a gopher, two owls, a Florida alligator, hundreds of insects, and several cats. My first writing job was at age 13. I founded a natural newsletter named Nature Lore and had a weekly column about birds in the Saskatchewan newsletter Star Phoenix. My adulthood started with World War II, and I was a second lieutenant in the 2nd Battalion, and I commanded my platoon through the campaign. After that, I worked as an intelligence agent in the Netherlands, arranging food drops that saved thousands of Dutch lives. After World War II, I lost faith in humanity because of all the death that I saw, but then I decided to study biology at the University of Toronto. I graduated. I married Frances Thornhill, had two small sons, Robert and David. Then I fell in love with Claire Wheeler and left my wife to marry Claire. I wanted to be an author because of many experiences in the wild as a child. Even though I was discouraged by my father, I wanted to inform people about how important the animals of the world are and how to protect them. My first novel, People of the Deer, was when on a field trip for the University of Toronto. I was outraged at the plight of the Caribou Inuit and wanted to do something about it. I wrote a book, and after I wrote that book, Canada changed its policy on the Caribou Inuit and now give regular supply of food and dry goods to the people that seemed to not exist before that. I have been criticized in the past because I exaggerate the truth too much. This type of writing I write about is called creative nonfiction. I also write memoirs about my life, such as The Dog Who Wouldn't Be, about my dog Mutt, who didn't want to be a dog, another one about World War II called The Regiment, and another one, I also write children's books such as Lost in the Barrens, about teenagers lost in the wild. My most famous novel, Never Cry Wolf, was about my experiences in the wild with wolves. That was so famous they made it into a movie. I also write about Vikings, Newfoundland, and Diane Fossey, an American scientist studying gorillas in Rwanda. When I was going on a book tour for Sea of Slaughter about the destruction of animal life in the sea, I was denied access to the U.S. because of violating any one of 33 statutes. These statutes included being a part of the Communist Party and other radical groups. My books over the years have been translated into 52 languages, and I have sold more than 14 million books. I now live in Porttown, Ontario with my wife Claire and go on regular walks with my dog Chester.
Hello, my name is Maggie and I am from the book Inkheart. My creator's name is Cornelia Maria Funke. Cornelia was born on December 10, 1958 to her father Karl Heinz and to her mother Helmi. Cornelia was born in Dorsten, Germany. When Cornelia was a child, she wanted to be a pilot or an astronaut, until her father told her that she had to do military training first. Cornelia later graduated the University of Hamburg and then graduated design college. Soon after, she became an illustrator and game designer, but she wanted to work with children, so she became a social worker for 3 years. In 1993, when Cornelia was 35, she wrote her first book, De Wilden Hühner, which means The Wild Chicks in English. Cornelia has now written over 40 books and is most famous for the Inkheart trilogy, the Reckless series, and the Thief Lord. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, she became most popular for her children's books, but her breakthrough came in 1997 for Dragon Rider, and then again in 2000 for The Thief Lord. When The Thief Lord first came to the United States, it was on the New York Times bestseller list for 25 weeks straight. Cornelia has received 4 awards in the United States and 11 awards in Germany. She has also been awarded the Sakura Medal for Dragon Rider and has been in Time Magazine's Most Influential People of 2005. In 1981, Cornelia married the love of her life, Rolf Funk, and then in 1989 had her daughter Anna. In 1994, she had her son Ben. Rolf sadly died 8 years ago in 2006 of cancer, and Cornelia now lives in LA with her dog Luna. Her son has a biting turtle named Hercules, and she thinks that that's odd, judging that it's a girl. Cornelia loves watching movies with her children, and it now fills her with joy that she has enough money to support children all over the world.
Hi, I'm Kira from the book Gathering Blue. I am a master seamstress, and I was born with a deformed leg. My creator is known as Lois Lowry, but when she was born on March 20th, 1937, in Honolulu, Hawaii, her name was Lois Ann Hammersburg. Her father was in the military, so she lived all over the world. She learned to read by age 3 and spent most of her childhood reading. Around the same time, she discovered her love for poetry. She was 16 when she graduated from high school. Then, in college, she received money from a man her parents had known. With the money, she bought a car, dropped out of Brown University when she was 19, got married to Donald Lowry, and had 4 kids before she was 25. That didn't last long. In 1956, they divorced. She met a man named Martin Small, and they moved to Maine together. It was in Maine where she went back to college and received a degree in English. Lois Lowry knew she wanted to be a writer by 3rd or 4th grade. The first time she ever saw her name in print was August 1947. She was 10. It was a short story she had written about her family. She always says that when she starts a book, she knows the beginning and the end. It's the middle she gets excited about. She also believes that writing and photography are very much alike. The cover of The Giver is a picture she took of an artist she had written about. In 1990, she was voted one of the most respected authors for young readers, even though The Giver was banned in some schools because some people thought the material was inappropriate for children. That same year, she received the Newbery Medal for her book Number the Stars. Then, in 1993, she received one for The Giver. She now lives in a small house with a Tibetan Terrier named Alfie and a cat named Lulu.
Hi, my name is Shel Silverstein. I was born on September 25th, 1930 to Nathan and Helen Silverstein. My mother was a homemaker and my father owned a bakery, and I have one little sister, Peggy. We grew up in Logan Square, Chicago. When I was young, I loved baseball, and it was my dream to be on the Chicago White Sox, my favorite team. But I soon realized that I had no athletic talent and started to write. When I was 18, I graduated from Roosevelt High School. After I graduated, I went to the University of Illinois, but got kicked out after 1 year due to bad grades. Then I went to the Chicago Institute of Fine Arts, but only lasted a year there as well. Finally, I went to Roosevelt University, where I published my first cartoons in the school newspaper, The Torch. But before I could finish college, I got drafted in the Army and served in Japan and Korea. I published some of my cartoons in the military publication, The Pacific Stars and Stripes. I also published my first book when I was in the Army. It was called Take 10 and it was a collection of all my cartoons from Stars and Stripes. Take 10 was published in 1955 and was republished a year later as Grab Your Socks. After I finished my service in the Army, I worked as a freelance cartoonist for a year, and then I met Hugh Hefner, who wanted to start a magazine called Playboy. In 1956, I worked on a travel series for Playboy, which took me to many places all over the world, including Italy, Switzerland, and Russia. But I got in a car accident which shattered my leg and forced me to stop traveling. This is when I decided to take up music. I recorded my first album, Harry Jazz, in 1959. My first song that was a big hit was called The Unicorn, which I later turned into a poem in my book Where the Sidewalk Ends. Another song I turned into a poem was A Boa Constrictor. I wrote The Giving Tree in 1964. It had a slow start, but eventually it reached the bestseller list and stayed there for almost a decade. Some of the other books I've written include A Light in the Attic, Where the Sidewalk Ends, Falling Up, Everything on It, The Missing Piece, and many more. In 1970, I had a daughter, Shoshona, but sadly her mother, Susan Hastings, died suddenly on June 29, 1975, and Shoshona died a few years later due to cerebral aneurysm. She was only 11, and I dedicated my book A Light in the Attic to her. A year later, in 1983, I had a son, Matthew, with a woman named Sarah Spencer. I've won a few awards over the years. I won a Grammy for my song A Boy Named Sue, which I wrote for Johnny Cash, and I've been nominated for an Oscar and a Golden Globe for my song I'm Checking Out in the film Postcards on the Edge. Finally, I was inducted in the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame. Sadly, I died on May 10, 1999 due to a heart attack while I was in Key West.
Hi, I'm Dolores, and I speak for the trees. And I'm Sally from The Cat in the Hat, and we're here to tell you about Dr. Seuss. He was born on March 2nd, 1904 on Howard Street in Springfield, Massachusetts. He had a good childhood until his family ran into some financial issues due to the Prohibition because the family brewery had to close. He was also being made fun of for his German heritage because World War I was beginning to develop, and so to prove his American patriotism, he joined the Boy Scouts to sell Liberty Bonds. He went to college at Dartmouth and began to write for the on-campus humor magazine, Jack-O-Lantern, or as the students called it, Jacko. He was the editor-in-chief and loved the position until he was kicked out because a few of his friends caught him drinking on campus. He didn't give up, though. He began to write under a pen name, Dr. Seuss. When his time was up at Dartmouth, he applied for a fellowship at Oxford University. He told his father, and his father, sure that his son would get the fellowship, put it out in the local newspaper that his son was going to Oxford. When Theodore didn't get the fellowship, his father paid the expensive tuition just to avoid embarrassment. At Oxford, Theodore found himself uninterested in his studies, and instead of information, his notebook pages began to fill with doodles and cartoons. It didn't help his grades, but it did get him his first wife. One day, Helen leaned over and complimented one of his drawings. Soon after, they moved to New York and got married. She couldn't have kids, so neither could he, and he used to say, "You have the kids and I'll entertain them." His first wife, Helen, was diagnosed with cancer and committed suicide to avoid the pain. He wrote his first book, A Story That No One Could Beat, and showed it to 27 different publishers who all turned it down, until he ran into an old friend that was now an editor of a local magazine who said he would publish it if Theodore changed the name. It's now the well-known book, and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street. He remarried the year after his wife committed suicide to an old friend, Audrey Stone. They were married for 27 years before our good friend Theodore died of throat cancer in 1991. So, as you know, the two of us are probably his most favorite characters, obviously. So, the book that I am in, The Lorax, is about awareness of the environment issues. This man is trying to cut down all of my truffle trees, and I have to stop him because he is endangering all of my animal friends. He doesn't listen, and he cuts down all of them, all of them. And all of my poor animal friends have to go and find a new home. This book teaches us that the environment is precious and important.
The book that Sally is in is The Cat in the Hat. It was a huge deal in history. Big. It changed books from the boring Dick and Jane books to exciting stories. Dr. Seuss won 2 Academy Awards, 2 Emmy Awards, a Peabody Award, and the Pulitzer Prize. Just think, if he hadn't followed his dreams, we wouldn't be here. Can you believe that?